Well, hello, folks. Holiday time is a weird time to make videos, I know, but I come across things and then I just have to make a video about it. Anyway, 2023 was a really good year for me. I had enough fun, enough company, enough interesting conversation, and everything to enjoy myself. I live in a peaceful place, which is wonderful. I, look at a lot of these articles where they're saying, thank God 2023 is over, stuff like that. And I've been reading those kinds of articles for 20 years, Thank God 2008 is over. Thank God 2010 is over. Thank God 2014 is over. Thank God 2016 is over. And then you have the pandemic and this, that, the other thing. It never seems to be that you have, other than in, pop magazines or magazines about, TV shows and celebrities or something. You never really have an article that says, wow, 2023 was great. 2024 is going to be even better. So I can imagine that 2024 will probably be a lot worse in some places in the world and maybe better for many people around the world. Who knows? But I came across an article by Hedges, who I think understands things very well on a deep level. I think he's sincere, honest. I think he does the work. I appreciate all the hyperlinks he always puts into his texts. He has a lot of experience as a journalist around the world and as a wartime journalist. So I trust him. And, intuitively, he makes sense to me. His words are eloquent always and touching. So I think he's good journalistic medicine. Some people may be frustrated by his perspective because it's not all sunny and happy. He tends to be a bit of a cultural critic, but not a polemicist. And yeah, I appreciate him. So I'm going to, suggest that you read an article by him and point out some things in the article that I think are extremely important. Symbolically, we're moving into a new year. There's going to be another number, 2024. There's going to be a New Year's Eve and a New Year's Day, and then it all starts over again, virtually or whatever. I mean, January 1st is just another day for me and for most people, but anyway, we'll see how things turn out because there are going to be elections and events, and we still have to fight for peace in the world, and we still have to confront challenges that are rapidly becoming uncontrollable. And we still have to live and let live and love our families and friends and enjoy life. So I'll go to the Chris Hedges article, and thank you for watching if anybody does, or if you watch next year. And I wish you all a happy 2024. Okay, so I'm going to recommend a book firstly because this is a really good book. You've probably heard of Robin Dunbar. He came up with the Dunbar number. People often talk about 150 people in a community. I won't go into that right now, but if you read this book, you'll really get it. Anyhow, I want you to understand the difference between religion and culture built around religion and state-sponsored terrorism. So Chris Hedges is a war journalist, a faithful person, a person of faith, who understands the world, world history, as I said before. And if anyone accuses you of being anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish just because you find what's going on in Gaza to be horrific, and you find what the state of Israel is doing terrible and wrong, and you don't like the fact that the U.S. supports this kind of thing, then you'll understand in greater context, if you read Hedges, if you read this book, the difference between state-sponsored terror and culture and religion. Okay, let's not get these things mixed up. So this is a good book. At the end of this video, I'm going to put a little clip of Robin Dunbar talking about this book, and you can go to YouTube and watch that if you're not going to read the book. So I want to also show you on Substack, Chris Hedges' Substack. I always enjoy Mr. Fish, this guy, who's an illustrator, his work. So basically the title of this piece I'm going to share with you today is Israel's Genocide Betrays the Holocaust. By obscuring and falsifying the lessons of the Holocaust, we perpetuate the evil that defined it. And so you can see by the picture here, can't post that on anywhere because all the red flags will go up and I'll get canceled, blocked, whatever. But you can see it on Substack. So I'm going to go over to the article now. So I've underlined a few things. He kind of puts things into context here. The thing I really appreciate about Chris is look at all these hyperlinks. So you can delve into everything he's talking about. He has, links to other articles and things, books, histories, and whatnot. And he's looking into interesting people like Hannah Arendt, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Bruno Bettenheim, Primo Levi, and so on. There's so many. And the history of genocide and violence, as you know, is long and terrible. And every generation has to fight against it, lest we become what we abhor. So he says here, we prefer the myth. We prefer to see in our own kind, our own race, our own ethnicity, our own nation, our own religion, superior virtues. We prefer to sanctify our hatred. And, I see this all the time with people who just spew anger and hatred towards whatever. Usually these people are just getting information from the zeitgeist or the mainstream business as usual sources, and they just internalize it, and they're just reacting as a member of the group, the awful mass, the hordes of mindless people. He quotes Toller, who's a very interesting character to look at, and he's got links here. But you should, if you want to, Google him. Most people have no imagination, Toller writes. If they could imagine the sufferings of others, they would not make them suffer so. What separates a German mother from a French mother? Slogans which defended us so that we could not hear the truth. And this is what you get on mainstream media all the time. It's just these slogans and sound bites and spin and marketing and PR bits that are to keep you, in line. Just keep the messaging going out there, and people will just internalize it and start to parrot it. So it's all good, this article. I'll just read a few pieces. It's short as well, and it's really to the point and powerful, so it's not a long read by any stretch. So we are all mirrored in Rumkowski, Levy reminds us. His ambiguity is ours. It is our second nature, we hybrids molded from clay and spirit. His fever is ours, the fever of Western civilization that descends into hell with trumpets and drums. So this guy, Rumkowski, betrayed a lot of, he was Jewish, and he betrayed a lot of Jews at the time. And then he was eventually sent to Auschwitz, and he was a transport guy helping prisoners to get from hurting victims to the gas chambers. And eventually he was beaten to death by inmates, prisoners. So trumpets and drums, and its miserable adornments are the distorting image of our symbols of social prestige. So for some reason, it's prestigious to become a murderer. We, like Rumkowski, are so dazzled by power and prestige as to forget our essential fragility. Willingly or not, we come to terms with power, forgetting that we are all in the ghetto, that the ghetto is walled in, that outside the ghetto reign the lords of death, and that those close by the train is waiting. Levy insists that the camps could not be reduced to the 2 blocks of victims and persecutors, he argues. It is naive, absurd, and historically false to believe that the infernal system, such as National Socialism, sanctifies its victims. On the contrary, it degrades them. It makes them resemble itself. He chronicles what we call the gray zone between corruption and collaboration. The world, he writes, is not black and white, but a vast zone of gray consciences that stands between the great men of evil and the pure victims. We all inhabit this gray zone. We all can be induced to become part of the apparatus of death for trivial reasons and paltry rewards. This is the terrifying truth of the Holocaust. What is the point of studying the Holocaust if not to understand its fundamental lesson? When you have the capacity to stop genocide and you do not, you are culpable? It is hard not to be cynical about the humanitarian interventionists, quote unquote, right? Barack Obama, Tony Blair, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Samantha Power, who talk in sanctimonious rhymes about the responsibility to protect, but are silent about war crimes when speaking out would threaten their status and careers. So I'm always talking about this kind of thing, careerism, status, what we do to fit in, the Bateman crowd, and how it distorts us and destroys our humanity and our sense of compassion and empathy and our consideration for life on earth, which we are a part of and can't exist without. So all means is you champion the dominant narrative. All it means is that you champion the dominant narrative. And I've said that a million times, People are pom-pom boys, people are cheerleaders, apologists for the status quo when they know, when they look around, that we're not doing a good enough job of helping people achieve a better life and have access to flourishing and creativity and awareness, knowledge, and peace and health. And, until we get there, it's just not good. Now, if you're a right-wing person, you're saying, well, maybe They're just types of people, you know. If you were born in the wrong place, that's God's will or whatever. Or, you know, those poor folks are just lazy, you know, all this kind of stuff. The exceptionalism of the fortunate. But that's nonsense. It makes sense that to understand that you could be on the other side of that equation at any time. And then what would you think? I'm just so lucky to have been born when and where I was born and have the opportunities I've had in my life. But I didn't choose that. I didn't create every single opportunity. I stumbled into a bunch of them and fumbled on. And some of us get really lucky, and some of us are just plain lucky, and some of us are just born into hardship. And it's important to recognize that and know we can do better as a community. So read about the Dunbar number. Read that book. A new world is being born. It is a world where the old rules, more often honored in the breach than the observance, no longer matter. It is a world where vast bureaucratic structures and technologically advanced systems carry out in public view vast killing projects. The industrialized nations, weakened, fearful of global chaos, are sending an ominous message to the global south and anyone who might think of revolt. We will kill you without restraint. One day, we will all be Palestinians. And trust me, if we aren't diligent, if we don't take action, if we don't do our part in our communities, yeah, what goes around comes around. Don't think it doesn't. And you can look at recent history in the 19th and 20th century in the United States to know it wasn't all rosy. So even the rich countries have had their problems. And you don't want to go there, believe me. And for the rest of people in the world, you know, they're born into hardship. They know how to suffer. They've never had a day of peace. They're struggling to eat and to get fresh water and to protect themselves from gangs and whatnot. And then we call them dirty, stinking, criminal refugees. Well, we're all refugees, and one day you're probably going to be one too, because we're not sorting out the problems that need to be sorted out. I always harp on that, but what else are you going to do? One day we will all be Palestinians. Well, let's pray you're not, but it can happen. So, quote, I fear that we live in a world in which war and racism are ubiquitous, in which the powers of government mobilization and legitimization are powerful and increasing, in which a sense of personal responsibility is increasingly attenuated by specialization and bureaucratization, and in which the peer group exerts tremendous pressures on behavior and sets normal norms. Christopher R. Browning writes in Ordinary Men about a German reserve police battalion in World War II that was ultimately responsible for the murder of 83,000 Jews. Quote, in such a world, I fear, modern governments that wish to commit mass murder will seldom fail in their efforts for being unable to induce ordinary men to become their willing executioners. And remember, the people doing the killing are just people. They're human beings just like you. And it's not that hard to convince people to do ugly things. Think of the lynchings during the civil rights period, and well, you can go back to the 1930s, just terrible in the United States. And these are normal people that you'd go to the diner and have a soda, have a vanilla float with, and chat about, you know, Jesus at church. So it's just so easy for us to slip. Evil is protean. It mutates. It finds new forms and new expressions. It changes easily. It's protean. It evolves. It shifts. It finds its niche and pushes us towards, this kind of terrible criminal behavior. Germany today is Israel's second largest arms supplier following the U.S. Isn't that something? This is an incredible point now. I want you to really think about this when you read the article. The supposed campaign against anti-Semitism, interpreted as any statement that is critical of the state of Israel or denounces the genocide, is in fact the championing of white power. It is why the German state, which has effectively criminalized support for the Palestinians, and the most retrograde white supremacists in the United States justify the carnage. Germany's long relationship with Israel, including paying over $90 billion since 1945 in reparations. So when we talk about reparations, they happen. $90 billion since 1945 in reparations to Holocaust survivors and their heirs is not about atonement, as the Israeli historian Ilan Pappé writes, but blackmail. The argument for a Jewish state, quote, the argument for a Jewish state as compensation for the Holocaust was a powerful argument, so powerful that nobody listened to the outright rejection of the UN solution by the overwhelming majority of the people of Palestine, Pappé writes. What comes out clearly is a European wish to atone. The basic and natural rights of the Palestinians should be sidelined, dwarfed, and forgotten, altogether for the sake of the forgiveness that Europe was seeking from the newly formed Jewish state. It was much easier to rectify the Nazi evil vis-a-vis a Zionist movement than facing the Jews of the world in general. It was less complex and, more importantly, it did not involve facing the victims of the Holocaust themselves, but rather a state that claimed to represent them. The price for this more convenient atonement was robbing the Palestinians of every basic and natural right they had and allowing the Zionist movement to ethnically cleanse them without fear of any rebuke or condemnation. The Holocaust was weaponized from almost the moment Israel was founded. It was bastardized to serve the apartheid state. If we forget the lessons of the Holocaust, we forget who we are and what we are capable of becoming. We seek our moral worth in the past rather than the present. We condemn others, including the Palestinians, to an endless cycle of slaughter. We become the evil we abhor. We consecrate the horror. So sorry about that. Not happy messages at the end of the year, but we're going into another year, 2024. There's going to be a presidential election in the United States, which could be very problematic. Who knows? We still have this ongoing nightmare in Ukraine. At some point, there won't be any more Ukrainians to fight, and Europe's going to have to decide if it wants to go to war with Russia, and if it does, that could well spiral into World War II, or III, sorry, and that will be just terrible. So instead of solving problems that we need to solve, energy problems primarily, watch Nate Hagen's The Great Simplification for information on that. But we have things we need to work on in the world, and instead of doing that, we're working on better, more efficient ways to kill one another, and we're going to use robots to do it in the future. This is insanity. Why are we like this? Think about the Dunbar number. At scale, we're pathetic. as members of a large nation state or large community. We forget what it means to be human. We go to Tinder for dates. We forget how to talk to each other and be with one another. And, technology becomes a substitute for human relationships, which is madness. Anyway, I hope you had a lot of fun this year, and I wish you all the best in 2024, and I'll see you next year, because I doubt I'm going to make another video before January 1st. It's already December 30. So take good care, everybody. Thank you for listening and for watching. Please like and subscribe and share this video. I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to try harder next year. So take good care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bulliam T. Out.
All of you, other than the two non-theologians in the audience, I'm going to talk about why people are religious, which I think is definitely something which, as a humanist fraternity, we should all be interested in. Because why is it that people are so intent on religion in this sense? So let me just give you a very brief history of religion. The general consensus has been for more than a century that religions began as essentially trance-based shamanic forms, what I call immersive religions, because every individual gets involved in it in some way. These are what the Victorians would have called animist religions, which kind of went out of favour as a term, but I think actually describes it very well, because it's a belief in a spirit world in which the spirit world is infused into everything around you. Trees, springs, mountains, whatever, all have a spirit associated with them in some way. These kind of religions have a very long history. They're still with us in the form of many hunter-gatherer societies. These are Kung San Bushmen from southern Africa, engaged in a trance dance, where the music and the dancing causes them to go into trance. Sometime around 8,000 years ago, just after the end of the last ice age, about the time people started living in villages, we see the first evidence for the rise of doctrinal religions. And this is associated with temples, ritual spaces of that kind, evidence for specialized priesthoods, and the like. And this essentially gives rise then a couple of thousand years later, during the period known as the Axial Age, between 3,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago approximately, to all the modern world religions. They all appear at the same time. What's interesting is almost all these doctrinal religions and the Axial Age religions appear in the same part of the world, this narrow band across the top of the tropics, on the northern side of the tropics, called the subtropical zone, the northern subtropical zone, all around the world, not just in the Middle East.